Video will be a real quick overview of creating VBA code in Microsoft Excel. Now, what I want to start with is just setting up Excel first for the Developer tab. So I'm going to go to the File menu and click Options, and I want to customize the ribbon. The right-hand panel shows the Developer tab with no checkbox, so I'll hit that little tick box right there. I like to put the Developer tab up at the top, so I'll hit the little arrow and bump that up a couple times so my Developer tab is now up here at the top. And now simply click OK. And there is my Developer tab right there next to the Home, and I'm ready to go. So to get into Visual Basic, it's quite simple. You see the nice button right there, the first button on the Developer tab, and I'll click that button. And there's Visual Basic. Now this screen is a little bit complex, but we're not going to use much of it. All we're really going to do is use this little panel right here to put a module, and then we're going to use a few of the buttons up here on the toolbar, but our code will be in this large window we see right here. So before I get started, though, there are a couple of settings that I want to make sure everybody has appropriately set. So if we go to the Tools menu, and on the Tools menu there's the Options item. Let's tick that. You want to make sure that you have all of the items on this window ticked. Everything checked. The one that says require variable declarations is one that's often not ticked, and you want to make sure that is. Every time you're programming in Visual Basic, you want to make sure that one is ticked. The other element that you might want to fix, I do all the time of course, because my eyes are kind of tired, is under the editor format, you can adjust your font size. Now I tend to use a large font, just makes it easier for students to see that font. So that's pretty much all you really need to fix. Let's click the OK button. And now we want to create some code. Now, I want you to notice over here in this left panel, the VBA project you see here is the workbook we currently have open. And in that workbook, we have two Excel objects. We have sheet 1. I only have one sheet in my workbook right now. You might have more sheets showing. And then you have the workbook object. It seems a little awkward to say that this is the project, but this is the workbook object. When I click on one of these objects, you'll notice the property sheet down below changes to reflect the item that I have selected. So the workbook, when you click here, you see that it's got all these different options. We won't do much with these, so you don't need to worry about that. Now I could put code in one of these two objects, but that's not really where I want you to put your code. So where I want you to put your code is in a module. So if we go to the Insert menu at the top and pop that down, you'll notice that there is a module option under the Insert menu. So let's go ahead and tick that. And it creates a modules folder, and it creates our first module for us. And you'll notice something happened over here in the code window. Before we go any further, I just want to show you that when I click on this module object, it actually does open up the properties window below, but there's only one property, and that's the name. You could actually change that name if you wish. It's not that important, but one reason why you might is if I change this, for instance, to Peter's Code, and you can't have spaces and you can't put apostrophes. It's kind of like a name for something in the program, and there are certain rules for that. But you'll notice that if I change that name, I'll just hit enter here. Now it reflects that right there, and you might recognize that that's your code more readily because it's got your name on it instead of just the word module 1. It's not critical that you do that, but it might be helpful. So here I am then over in my code window, and I want you to notice that there is this declaration at the top, option explicit, and you always want to have that at the top of your code. Now you could have typed it yourself if you wished, but when we went into the Tools menu under Options and we said Require Variable Declaration, Well, when you tick that little box, I'm going to click cancel now, that will put this at the top of every one of your code windows. And that is what requires you to declare your variables. So we do want to always see that. So let's go ahead and add a real quick sub procedure. I'm going to show you a couple of ways to do this. One way to do it is if you want a new sub procedure is to simply type the word sub followed by the name of your procedure. So let's just call this hello world. It's got to be no spaces. You'll notice that I used a modified camel case there, so every subsequent word has a capital letter. Sub procedures have parameter lists. That is indicated by the open and closed parentheses. In this case, there's nothing inside the parameter list, and so we just leave it as you see it. And then I hit enter, and a little magic occurs. It adds on the end sub for me automatically, capitalizes the word sub, and I'm ready to put in some code. So I'm going to hit the tab key. Indenting is going to be a very important thing for you to remember to do, and I will be constantly reminding you. You want to make your code easy to read. And I'm going to type in a very simple Visual Basic statement that has to do with displaying something in a message box. The function for doing that is called MSGBOX, message box. Now I'm not sure why they didn't spell that out, but they didn't, and so you have to get the spelling exactly correct. Now following the message box function's name, we just want to give it a string that we want it to display on the screen. And a string is indicated with quotation marks. So you type the quotation mark and then whatever string you want it to display. So let's go ahead and just type in hello world. And then we end the string with the closing quotes. And if I hit enter right now, it adds a blank line. That's okay, no big deal. But notice how it capitalized the function name message box there. So that was an automatic thing. And notice when I hit enter, it went to the same indentation level that I had set for that first statement. So that's kind of a convenience tool that Visual Basic has. That's actually one of the tick boxes in the options we set. Well, you'll notice my cursor is flashing right here, and it's inside the sub. So if you have your cursor inside a sub and you're ready to run a program, or in this case simply a sub procedure, you have a couple little options up here in your menu bar. The little green arrow runs a program, the little square box would reset a program. If it ever fails and you're in a debug window, you can hit that reset and it will reset everything so you can change your code and then run it again. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit this run button. And lo and behold, it pops over to the Excel window, runs the message box function, and displays the text that was in that box. So now I can click OK, and I'm back in Hello World. Now, how would you run this if you were in the Excel window? So let me show you. In the little toolbar here, you'll notice there is the Excel icon at the very far left. If you click that, it opens up the Excel window. And here I am now in Excel. And if I want to run a macro in Excel, right there in my Developer tab, you notice it says Macros. Now, if I don't have the Developer tab open, there is a way to get to the macros without the Developer tab. So if I click the Home ribbon, I can kind of look around here, and it's sort of like I have no idea where it is. You know, you're kind of scanning all around looking for it. Let's try looking through some of the other tabs here. Nothing looking good there. Draw, not so much. Page layout, not so much. Formulas, not finding it. Data, still not finding it. Review, no such luck. View, oh, view. Way over here at the right of the view ribbon, macros. Click that, view macros, and you can record macros. And you can change whether or not you're using relative references. But if I click View Macros, oh, I get a little box showing me my macros. And so I can press the Run button on that selected Hello World macro, and it runs it. Cool. Click OK. Let's go back to Visual Basic. So the easy way to get there, of course, is to simply go to the Developer ribbon and then hit Visual Basic on that big button. Now let's take a look at another way to do to put in a sub, and I'll just click down here and hit enter a couple times. In fact, you know, I don't like that blank line. I'm going to go ahead and delete that because I just want to keep things nice and tidy. So I'll go back down here. The second way you can insert a sub that I'm not sure is that useful if you know how to type, but you'll notice there is an insert option up here just that we used for the module. So if we go to insert, you'll notice an option for inserting a procedure. And it's a dialog box by the ... We can tell that, so I'll click that. And oh, I've got a number of procedure types here. So let's go ahead and enter a name for our procedure. I'll go ahead and say hello again. Just change the name up a little bit. And I want a sub procedure. And you'll notice down here I've got a public and private. We will not be using private, I don't believe, this term. So you can leave that alone. We can discuss what that means later if you're interested. But right now, just leave it public. And we don't want all our variables to be statics. Don't worry about that right now either. But we want a sub. We want it to be public. We click OK. And it gives me my new sub. And a big old gap here. Not sure where that's coming from, but I'll just delete those extra blank lines. This basically says that this procedure can be used anywhere throughout the entire VBA project. And you'll notice I didn't use it on mine, and it still worked just fine. And so the default is to make a sub public if you don't specify otherwise. So these two sub procedures you see are completely equivalent. And you can leave public off if you wish. It saves you a little bit of typing. I'm going to go ahead and add another message box to my little sub here. So MSG-BOX, and I'll just do hello again. End quote. And now I have a couple of sub procedures. You'll notice this time that my cursor is outside of any sub procedure. The last time I ran it, I had my cursor inside my first sub procedure, but now I'm going to put my cursor down here, and so it's no longer inside any procedure. It could be in between, it could be above, but let's just say I have it down here at the end, and I'm going to hit the go button, and oh, it went to this little macros dialog box. Well, the reason for this is because I was not inside any sub procedure, and Visual Basic for application says, well, what do you want to run? And so it pops up the macros box, and I can pick one of these and go ahead and run it. I'll just click that one and run it. And it says hello again, and click OK. And I'm back in my code window. Now, I find it more convenient, of course, simply to make sure my cursor is inside the sub, and then when I hit go, it just runs. I don't have to look at that little dialog box and pick the one I want, and so on. So I'll click OK. So at this point, I've made a couple of sub-procedures, and I'm ready to start learning more about Visual Basic for applications to make more sophisticated programs in Visual Basic for applications. So I'm going to click back over to Excel, and if I want to save this workbook so that I can come back to this code, there are a couple things you got to remember. One is you've got to save it as an Excel workbook, of course, but it has to be an Excel workbook that allows macros. Now, I'm constantly forgetting to do this when I'm saving my workbooks. Now, I think Excel will warn you if you try to do it. Let me go ahead and put in this name here real quick. I just call it first, and I'm going to hit save, and let's see if Excel warns me that I'm not saving a macro workbook. And it says, oh, you got a VB project in here. To save a file with those features, you click no, and then you have to choose the correct file type. So I'll click no, go back, choose the correct file type. You want a macro workbook, and then I can save that, and I'm good to go. So whenever you do that, it'll warn you. It's hard to not save it with your macros. If you went ahead and saved that and didn't change it to a macro-enabled workbook, it strips all your macros out and you'd lose all your code, and you wouldn't get it back. You'd be unhappy. So that's just a real quick run through of a few things to do VBA in Excel.